frequently throughout that day?
Yes.
How about people's voices? Did you hear any people's voices on the night of the 22nd to the 23rd?
I heard a female voice.
Did you know who it was?
No.
Did you ever see a female in the residence on that date, the 22nd or the 23rd?
No.
Do you recall specifically anything that the female voice had said?
No.
Did you hear two voices or one voice or more than two voices?
Just one voice.
Did you know anything about who the female was talking to or if she was talking to anyone?
No.
At some point, did you fall asleep on the night of the 22nd into the 23rd?
Yes.
And how were you awakened on that day?
I was awakened to bang at my door from the police.
What happened when the police banged on your door?
I woke up and they told me to come to the kitchen.
And did you do that?
Yes.
And who was in the kitchen when you got there?
My mom and Steve.
And did Steve live with your mom at that time?
Yes.
And you had not seen either of them prior to that time frame, is that right?
Yes.
And did the police want to speak with you at that time?
No.
Did you ultimately go to the Green Bay Police Department and speak with police about what you observed that night?
Yes.
Did that occur that morning, the 23rd?
Yes.
And you told them what you could remember?
Yes.
Thank you. No further questions, Ava.
Mr. Fraley, cross-examination.
Ava, how are you?
All right.
Do you know Taylor Schabusiness?
Yes, when
How
I
do
was a kid.
How do you know her?
My brother's best friend.
Okay. Where did your brother go to high school?
I don't remember.
Okay. But you're going to be a senior this fall?
Sorry?
You're going to be a senior this fall?
Yes.
Where do you go to high school?
Objection, relevance.
I'll withdraw.
Sustained.
I can withdraw. So you have a car, correct?
Yes.
You have a RAV4?
Yes.
And your mom has a car, right?
Yes.
It's a VW Jetta?
Yeah. Maybe. I'm not sure.
Okay. You've ridden in it?
Huh?
Have you taken a ride in your mom's car in the past?
Yeah.
Okay. And then Steve Hendricks, that's your mom's boyfriend, correct?
Yes.
He's got a car, right?
Yes.
So when you're at the house, when you're at your mom's house, do you all park your cars in the driveway?
Yes.
Okay. When you went to your dad's wedding, that was on February 22nd, is that right? I
Yes.
think it was a Tuesday, right?
I believe so.
And at some point, the wedding was over and you went to your mom's to spend the night, correct?
Yes.
And did you pull into the driveway at your mom's house on Stony Brook?
I don't remember.
Okay. Typically, when you go to your mom's house, do you park your car in the driveway?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see any other vehicles besides your car, your mom's car, and Steve's car?
Yes.
What else? What other cars did you see?
A van
Where was it?
in the driveway.
When did you see it?
Sorry?
When did you see the van?
When I came back from Dad's wedding.
Okay. So did you pull behind the van then?
No.
Okay. Where did you park your car?
The side of the road.
Okay. Did you went in the house then after the wedding, correct?
Yes.
And what did you do?
I went to my room.
You went straight to your room?
Yes.
Did you talk to your mother at all?
No.
Did she know that you were home?
I don't know.
How about Steve Hendricks? Did you talk to him?
No.
Okay. And you went in your bedroom, did you leave the door open or did you close the door?
I closed the door.
Okay. And then, did you go to sleep?
Yes.
What time did you go to sleep?
I don't know.
Okay. Do you remember what time you got to your mom's house that day?
No.
Okay. But it was in the evening?
Yes.
After dinner time?
I don't know.
Okay. When you came in the house, did you ever see Taylor Schabusiness in the house on Tuesday, February 22nd of 2022?
No.
Did you see your brother Shadtherian in the house on that date?
No.
Did you ever hear his voice?
No.
How about Taylor's voice? Did you hear her voice?
Mumbles.
You didn't know who it was though, correct?
Yes.
Did you go in the basement on February 22nd, that Tuesday?
No.
Did you go in the basement after you woke up when the police came to your house on Wednesday, February 23rd of 2022?
No.
When the police came to your house, is it your testimony that they knocked on your bedroom door
Yes.
and you woke up then?
Yes.
And then you went to the kitchen?
Yes.
And did they have you sit by the kitchen table?
Yes.
And then you waited for further directions, correct?
Yes.
And then is it true that at some point then you, your mom, and Steve were all taken down to the police department to talk?
Yes.
Your brother, Shadtherian, would he have people come over oftentimes to play video games or hang out in the basement?
Object
Rarely.
relevance.
Mr. Freilich?
Well, it goes to people coming in the house, people that he would invite
Sustain
over.
the objection. Ask another question.
Okay. How often would your brother come to the house?
I don't know.
Was it just kind of sporadic, like kind of whenever?
Yeah.
Okay. There wasn't any kind of set schedule, is that fair?
Sorry?
There was no set schedule, is that true?
Yeah.
And were you at the house on Monday, February 21st of 2022?
I don't know.
Okay. Did you get up on February 22nd to look out the window at all?
No.
Okay. When you went to bed, you were out? Is that fair to say that you were sleeping until the police knocked on your door?
Yes.
You didn't wake up to go get something to eat or anything like that?
No.
And the house at 829 Stony Brook Lane, there's a basement down there, correct?
Yes.
It's kind of like a finished basement, right?
Yes.
And then there's the floor level with a kitchen, living room, and your bedroom, right?
Yes.
Bathroom, correct?
Yes.
And then the upstairs, kind of like the loft area, that's where your mom and Mr. Hendricks, that's their bedroom?
Yes.
Okay. And when you were there on February 22nd, you couldn't hear any conversations or anything like that, correct?
Yes.
That's true, right?
Yes.
Okay, nothing further. Thank you.
Redirect?
I have no redirect. I just want to confirm that the state had not subpoenaed this witness. I want to make sure that she's released from the defense subpoena.
Yes, she can be released.
Right, very good. You can step down. State's next witness?
Judge, I think we could call another witness. However, this is a good natural break in the state's case at this point in time. I wonder if the court would entertain allowing us to break for the noon hour at this time.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's about 10 minutes to 12. We're going to break for lunch, and I'm going to ask that you be back in the jury room, ready to go at 1 o'clock. All right? All rise for the jury. back at least 5 minutes till 1 in case there's anything that we need to take up, and then we'll get underway promptly at 1. All right, with that, we're in recess.
Thank you.
Thank you. Be seated. I did say 5 too.
Todd, can I get her a pen? In case you need it. I know you're listening very intently, so.
You're only the judge, sir.
I know. Nobody cares what I say. We'll get there when we're good and ready.
Is it nice now?
Yeah. 90 more.
9?
90.
Did you just ask her that?
Take a look at what it is.
Yeah, I'll try to.
Pointed here.
Okay.
Coastal.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
Coastal.
I can see.
Okay, we're back on the record then. Anything to bring up before the jury comes back in? Mr. Saunders?
No.
Mr. Freilich?
No.
Counsel, my thought on the issue related to Dr. O'Donnell is to have the attorney's report tomorrow morning at 8:15 and have the jury in the juror room at 8:45. That'll give us 30 minutes to address this issue. It'll give me a chance this evening to read over Mr. Freilich's submittal, and then I'll give you a decision then. Sound reasonable?
That's fine.
Mr. Freilich?
Yes, would the court in that time allow Dr. O'Donnell to be on the phone to confer with the court if you needed to ask him some questions?
I'm not sure.
Or to provide
About-
testimony?
About what? I mean, I
Or-
don't think this isn't, I don't think a Dauber hearing. At the same time, I don't know that courts necessarily are mandated to take testimony at a Dauber hearing. My understanding, but I haven't read the submittals, which makes it a little bit difficult, is I don't think the state's objection is necessarily qualifications as to, for example, pharmacology or things of that nature. It's one of relevance. But maybe, Mr. Lezay, you brought that up earlier.
So I think it's possible that portions of the amended report wander into areas where the doctor is not qualified to render an opinion, but I don't think he phrases it that way. He phrases it as something that he viewed in other reports. So he phrases that as his review of other people's reports. I question the accuracy of his review because he mentions a condition that none of the other professionals in this case suggest that the defendant has. But to the extent that he's not going to offer a diagnosis, then I don't think there's really a Daubert relative to his qualifications. But to the extent that he's offering a diagnosis, that is something he would not be, in my view, qualified to render.
Okay, well, then I think what we're going to do is this, because it sounds like it could be more extensive than what I thought. I'm going to have you here at 8:15 tomorrow. The jury will come in at 8:30, and then tonight I'll read the submittal from Mr. Freilich, because all this is coming in very late. First thing I want to say is this is precisely what I tried to avoid with the schedule that I gave you guys. Doing exactly what we're doing. We're doing exactly what I tried to avoid doing. But I have to read it now first in order to figure out what the next thing we need to do is. So, the notion that I need testimony from Dr. O'Donnell, I can't even tell you whether that's something I need or not because I haven't read it yet, and I won't be able to do that till this evening. So tomorrow morning at 8:15, we'll bring the jury in at 8:30, and then from there, which means that you'll probably get a decision from me right before you need to know the answer. And I'm sure everybody would love to have a decision a little bit earlier than that so they could plan, but that just won't happen. So anyways, I'm a little bit frustrated, but certainly that'll pass. Anything else we need to talk about? I think we've already done this. Anything else, Mr. Saunders?
No.
Mr. Freilich?
No.
All right. Very good. Then we'll bring the jury back in. In the afternoon session, so the case is still with the state, and I will turn to you, Mr. Saunders, or Mr. Lezay. Go ahead, call your next witness.
The state will call Petra Schwab.
Okay, if you want to step up right over here, and just walk right up here, and then before you have a seat, if you could turn and face her and raise your right hand, she will place you under oath.
You solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in the matter now before the court, so help you God? I do. Please have a seat and state your name for the record.
My name is Petra Schwab.
Okay, and then if you could just make sure you stay close to the microphone so we can hear you. All right, and then with that, Mr. Lizay, the witness is yours.
Ms. Schwab, can you state for the record how you are employed?
I am employed by the Brown County Medical Examiner's Office.
And what is your position with the Brown County Medical Examiner's Office?
My current position is the Director of Operations.
And how long have you been employed with the Brown County Medical Examiner's Office?
About 6.5 years.
And do you have experience in that general field prior to your work with the Brown County Medical Examiner's Office?
Yes.
And what is that experience?
I did both my studies and initial employment in Cape Town, South Africa.
And what type of work did you do in Cape Town that was consistent with this type of medical examiner work?
I was mainly involved in the investigation of deaths which were fire-related.
And can you describe your educational background?
Sure. I have a Bachelor of Science degree in Human Life Science. And in South Africa, we have a one-year postgraduate degree, which is called an honors degree. And that degree is in biological anthropology. I then did my master's degree in biomedical forensic science.
And what other positions have you held at the Brown County Medical Examiner's Office?
I started off as the Deputy Lead Medical Legal Investigator. I then moved up to the Lead Medical Legal Investigator and have since been moved into the Director of Operations position.
And what was your position with the Brown County Medical Examiner's Office in February of 2022?
In February of 2022, I would have been the Lead Medical Legal Investigator.
And what is a medical legal investigator?
So essentially, you could see us almost as a nurse in the hospital. We're the eyes and ears for the doctor, for our forensic pathologist. So we do that initial investigation on scene, the initial assessment on scene, and then that is reviewed by our chief medical examiner.
And you talked about a forensic pathologist. What does the forensic pathologist generally do?
So generally, a forensic pathologist, if they're board certified, they are the ones that actually perform the autopsies and oversee all of the investigations the office does.
At the time of this event in February of 2022, who was the chief medical examiner that you were working under in Brown County?
There was a transition between chiefs, but the medical examiner that I was working with on this case was Dr. Vincent Tranquita. I apologize for not remembering if he was the chief at the time, because there was a switch over in leadership.
But Dr. Tranquita was the forensic pathologist who was assigned to this case?
Correct.
And at the time of this event in February of 2022, which office was Dr. Tranquita stationed out of?
Dr. Tranquita worked for the Dane County Medical Examiner's Office. At the time, Brown County had a contract with Dane County for oversight from forensic pathologists, and they provided our autopsy services as well.
And that's not currently the setup, is that right?
No, we have since hired our own chief medical examiner, who is a forensic pathologist. So we are now independently performing autopsies here in Brown County.
But as it existed in February of 2022, that was the standard practice for Brown County, correct, to use the Dane County Medical Examiner's Office for autopsies?
Correct.
And talk generally about the process that you use when you are called out to the death scene by law enforcement.
Generally, it can happen in different ways, but the most common would be that the 911 dispatch center, they give the on-call investigator a call, and they let them know what they are responding to and where the address of where they're needed. Sometimes we get calls directly from detectives, sometimes we get call from the hospital or a hospice agency, but for scene responses, most commonly it's through the 911 dispatch center to the on-call investigator.
And on this particular date, February 23rd of 2022, What was the process for you to get called out to the scene at 829 Stony Brook?
So that morning, I believe a call was placed to our office by a detective with the Green Bay Police Department, just informing our office of the situation. That call was taken by the on-call investigator that was in the office at the time, and the policy at that, which is still in place, is that they are to then notify the lead medical legal investigator, which would have been me at that time, of such a case.
And once you were notified, what did you do?
I then tried to gather a bit more information. Things were very preliminary at that stage, and we asked to be notified once they were ready for us.
And did you receive follow-up notification from the Green Bay Police Department?
Yes.
And what did you do then before going out to the scene?
Before going to the scene, I just made sure that I had all of my supplies. We had a general understanding of what the case was that we were going to, so I made sure that I had all of the supplies I may need, and then using the on-duty vehicle, I would have traveled to the scene.
And were you or was law enforcement responsible for notifying then the actual medical examiner or the forensic pathologist?
I was actually, when I was initially notified that morning, I would have notified Dane County's Director of Operations, and they in turn would have notified Dr. Tranquita, the forensic pathologist, that his response would be needed. And we kept in touch that morning with regards to a general time. Seeing that they would be coming up from Madison, we just wanted to make sure that we timed things out correctly. And obviously with law enforcement needing to do what they need to do prior to us coming, we were just waiting for that notification when they were ready for us.
And do you know about what time you arrived on scene that morning?
It was probably around 11 o'clock in the morning.
When you arrived on scene, what did you do?
I would have introduced myself to police officers on scene, and I believe I placed PPE on and entered the living room area of the residence, where there were various members of law enforcement, and they briefed me on the scene and what information they had at that point.
What was your understanding about the information law enforcement had collected at that point?
My understanding was that the head of a male individual had been found in the basement, and that they had reason to believe that there were additional human remains within the basement. They had informed me that they had a suspect at that time, and they informed me that there might be a secondary location for human remains as well.
And you mentioned PPE. What is PPE and what is the purpose of using it?
Sure, I apologize. PPE would generally be personal protective equipment. So we use that both to protect ourselves as well as the integrity of the scene. So in this case, it would have been a Tyvek suit or a bunny suit, which would have been included booties, and it goes all over, and it even has a hood around your face. So, and I would have, once we went down into the basement, I would have been wearing gloves. I probably was not wearing gloves initially.
So did you make your way toward the basement of that residence prior to the arrival of Dr. Tranquita?
Correct. We tried to make the pronouncement of death as soon as possible from when we arrived. So once we gathered information, or once I discussed information with law enforcement at least, then I would have proceeded down to the basement just for a cursory view of what the situation was, as well as to pronounce death.
And were you able to do that based on your initial observations on scene?
Yes.
And again, is that something that it's typical that you would do if you're able to prior to the arrival of the doctor?
Yes.
And were you able to collect identifying information about the person that was deceased?
Yes. Law enforcement provided the presumptive identification at that point, provided a name and date of birth, and we later then also asked for additional photographic evidence for identification purposes for comparing.
And did the deceased have any distinct marks that allowed you to easily identify him?
Yes, he had a tattoo on his, I can't believe, forget which side it was, but on one of the temporal regions on the side of your head here, it would have been a question mark.
And after identification was made, what did you do? After pronouncement and identification were made, what did you do?
I would have backed out the scene and waited outside until Dr. Tranquita arrived so that we would do the rest of our duties together.
After Dr. Tranquita arrived, describe what steps you took at that point.
So we were working very closely with the Green Bay Police Department's forensic science unit with this case. So we were moving around the scene kind of together. And the first thing that we would have approached would have been the bucket with the human head in it.
And where was that located?
It was located downstairs in the basement, just to the right as you came down the stairs into the finished portion of the basement, which seemed to be used as a bedroom. So there was a bucket at the bottom of those stairs to the right.
Once you made contact with that bucket, or what would be essentially the first container with human remains, can you describe the process that you used in order to collect that evidence?
So we made the decision to use smaller body bags, so essentially would be infant and child body bags. So we would have placed a body bag out. For the bucket, it was a infant-sized body bag with a evidence sheet laid over it. We would have then removed what we found in the bucket individually, photographed it. Once it was documented and photographed, we would have wrapped the evidence sheet up and then placed that in the body bag and closed that body bag. And then written on the body bag as to, we decided to label the body bags as to which container they were in.
After processing that first container 1, the bucket, what did you do then?
We moved on to the next container, which we suspected had human remains in it. There was, I believe it's a blue bag, was the second container that we looked at from the outside. Well, let me back it up. The blue bag would have been on a dresser in front of the bed in the basement, and there seemed to be what looked like some human tissue on the outside of the bag, and so we decided to focus in on that bag next.
And did you use a similar process with that particular container?
Correct. We took the container and put it onto the evidence sheet that we had laid out with the body bag we had laid out, and we would have slowly emptied what we found in that bag while we were documenting and photographing what was found.
And once you processed the blue bag, was your attention then drawn to a subsequent container?
Yes, we then focused in on a backpack, which was a pink and black backpack that was at the bottom of the bed, the foot of the bed, on the floor. It seemed to have some blood staining on the outside, so we focused in on that bag next.
And I should ask, with respect to the blue bag as well, did you find a substantial amount of human remains within that receptacle?
The blue receptacle?
Correct.
Yes, we did find some human remains in the blue receptacle.
And then how about the pink backpack?
The pink backpack, so we would have done the same process. We had a body bag laid out with an evidence sheet. We placed the bag on the sheets, and then we unzipped, starting with the front zip towards the back, and we unzipped each zipper and would remove whatever we found and document and photograph that.
If there are items other than human remains that are found within those containers that might have evidentiary value, what was done with those items?
So if there are any items other than the human remains, the medical examiner's office, our purview is the human remains. So if there are other items of evidentiary value or possible evidentiary value, that's generally collected by law enforcement.
Okay. And were there other items of evidentiary value that were found within those containers while you were there?
Yes, we found knives in, I don't remember if all of the bags had knives, but we found multiple knives throughout the bags.
And those are items that would have been within the purview of law enforcement?
Correct. We would have taken them out we would have photographed them ourselves. And as I said, we were working very closely with the forensic science unit from Green Bay, so they were taking photos the same time we were, and then they would have collected those knives.
So after you found and processed the human remains that were contained in the pink and black backpack, what was the next container that you noted?
The next container we moved to was a blue tote bin that was on the floor at the head of the bed, and it had a bunch of laundry or, I can't remember if it's clothing or blankets, but something on top of it, and there seemed to be a small amount of blood on the outside of the tote bin, and so we would have moved our attention to that at that stage, and we slowly removed what was on top until we could see what was in the tote bin.
And what did you note in the tote bin?
In the tote bin, we found a substantial amount of blood at the bottom of the tote bin. We also found a torso of a human male.
In terms of the other significant body parts that would have been located within the tote bin, do you recall what was located within the tote?
So the torso with the arms attached, there would have been other fragmented remains. There was some muscle tissue and certain organs.
So those are the 4 containers that we've discussed already. In addition to the 4 containers, were there any other containers located in the room that had a substantial amount of human remains?
No. There were some other containers or some other backpacks that we peeked in, but there was no other remains found in the basement.
And so you found remains in 4 separate containers. In the areas that were not the containers, so in general in the living space in the basement, what were your observations about the living space?
So one of my first observations, I guess, would have been that they really, as you walk into the basement, there really wasn't a significant amount of blood that we could see as you walked in. We would have later noted, once we moved some things off the bed, that there was some what appeared to be blood staining on the mattress, and perhaps some small little pieces of tissue that were suspected to be human tissue in the carpeted area, but there was a shower in a laundry room nearby, and there seemed to be, again, some small pieces of what could have been human tissue.
Is it fair to say that relative to the amount of damage to the body that you observed, there was not a lot of blood or tissue that was readily available outside of the containers?
Correct. I would definitely say that I would have thought there would have been more blood on the scene outside of those containers.
And from a medical legal standpoint, what is the potential significance of that?
Objection calls for speculation.
I think it calls for a professional opinion.
Foundation?
Overruled. Go ahead and answer if you can.
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. So from a medical legal standpoint, when you see as much damage to the body as you noted, but then don't see as much tissue or blood throughout the room, is there any potential significance from an investigative standpoint based on your training and experience?
There are various things that it might spark me to think. One of the things would be, did it happen here? Another thing would be how. Just would make me think, how did this happen? How did this take place? In such a way that the blood was collected, and not all of the blood I would expect to have been in the human body was necessarily in that tote bin or amongst the other containers. So it would just spark questions as to how this would have occurred.
Did you locate all of the significant body parts that you were looking for that were associated with the deceased at that scene on Stony Brook?
Yes.
Did you know if parts were missing?
Yes.
What did you know was missing from the body?
So as we were going, we were trying to make sure that at least the remains that we were finding were consistent with one person. And by the time we were done processing the human remains in the basement, we seemed to be missing a significant portion of the lower limbs.
And did Did you obtain any information about where those items may potentially be located?
We were informed that they may potentially
Objection
be.
hearsay, Your Honor?
Not as offering it for the truth of the matter asserted, I'm offering it to support how she later goes to a different location, how she gets there.
Overruled. You can answer the question.
We were informed that there were potential human remains in a van that had been towed by the Green Bay Police Department to their evidence storage unit.
Did you ultimately respond to that location?
Yes.
And who went with you to the evidence storage unit?
Dr. Tranquita would have been with me too, as well as various members of the Green Bay Police Department.
And upon arrival at the storage unit, did you continue to use your PPE and all of the other evidence processing techniques that you discussed earlier?
Correct. We would have used a new set of PPE once we arrived at that location.
And what did you do once you arrived at that location?
So we initially just took photographs of the outside of the vehicle. I don't believe that the police had processed the vehicle yet at all. They were waiting to do that in conjunction with us. So we kind of peered in, just noting what was in the vehicle, and then we would have opened the doors and the trunk to take a look just at a general view of what was in the vehicle.
And did you locate anything of significance or any human remains within the vehicle?
Yes, we ultimately did find a crock pot box that had human remains in the box.
Do you recall specifically what you recovered in the crock pot?
We would
box?
have recovered the full set of we would have recovered parts of both lower limbs.
And were those then collected using a similar methodology as what you described at Stony Brook?
Correct. So we took the crock pot box outside of the van, and we placed that on some paper material next to our evidence sheet, and then we unpacked what was found in the crock pot box and documented and photographed that as we had previously.
And what did you do once you packaged the human remains at the scene at Green Bay Evidence?
So we would have closed the evidence sheet, put it in the body bag, sealed that body bag, and transported the remains to our the Brown County Medical Examiner's cooler.
And where is that located? Or was it at the time?
Yeah, we have changed locations since, but at the time we had a temporary cooler out at the Brown County Highway Department.
And once it's placed in storage at the temporary cooler, what is the process for moving the remains to another location?
So while we were contracted with Dane County, seeing that all our examinations or autopsies would take place down in Madison, so Dane County, as part of their contract with us, had a transport van and an individual that was hired as a driver. So they would have come up and collected the body bags from us, and it's a cooled van, and then that's transported down to Dane County for further examination.
And I should backtrack because I don't think I asked this question with respect to Stony Brook. What happened with the remains that were taken into the possession of the medical examiner's office at the Stony Brook address?
For the home address, we, as I described previously, we had packaged each container into a body bag each. Those smaller body bags were then all placed together in one larger adult-sized body bag, and that body bag was sealed and dated, signed, timed. The policy of our office is to have funeral homes assist with adult-sized human remains, and so we would have contacted the closest funeral home just for assistance with transport. And I believe the closest funeral home would be Blaney Funeral Home, so they came to the scene, and because usually I would follow with the funeral home to the cooler, but in this instance, when we knew we had another scene to go to, I had our morgue technician at the time. She came to the scene and then made that transport with Blaney Funeral Home for us so that I could go to the next scene.
And the information about the transportation logs that are associated with the the remains, is that something that in your current role you have access to those records and that's a record maintained in the regular course of business?
The information regarding transport?
Correct.
Correct. We do document that.
And do you know if that was documented in this case?
Yes,
As part of your work in this case, did you prepare a report?
I did.
Have you reviewed that report prior to court here today?
Yes.
I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 4. Can you identify that document?
That appears to be the report. It would be the face sheet of our medical examiner's office report, as well as the portion of the report that is mine.
I would move for the addition of Exhibit
The objection.
No objection.
4 is received.
4. And then, could you describe for the record Exhibits 5 and 6? Once you've had a chance to look at them.
Exhibit 5 is a photograph of the larger adult-sized body bag that we would have placed those smaller body bags within at the Stony Brook address. It is labeled as Shad Therian, and there are the bag appears to be sealed, as well as initials that say sealed by PS at 1506 on 2/23/22.
And the next exhibit, what is that?
Sorry?
And the following exhibit, did you describe that one as well? I apologize.
Sure. Exhibit 6 is a child-sized body bag. This would have been at the Green Bay storage unit location, which had the remains found in the crockpot box. This is sealed, and it is labeled as container number 5, crockpot box van. And by the seal number, it says sealed by Petra at 1634 on 2/23/22.
Your Honor, I would move for the admission of Exhibits 5 and 6 as well, and I would ask for permission to publish 5 and 6 via the screen.
Any objection to the admission of those exhibits, Mr. Freilich?
No objection to admission of Exhibits 5 and 6, but I would object to publication, Your Honor. It's already been described.
And overrule the objection. You can publish those to the jury.
Ms. Schwab, does the screen, I think there's a screen down in front here as well, is the screen accurately depict what is contained in Exhibit 5?
Correct.
And then I think if it's toward the right-hand side of the screen or the photo where it indicates the name and then the information that you indicated about the date and the sealing, that's toward the right side of the photo, is that correct?
Correct. Near the zipper there, but with the seal.
Okay. And the purpose of the seal and signature again?
It's to document chain of custody, essentially. When I sealed that bag, and then once it gets to Dane County for autopsy, does that seal tag still match? There's numbers on that seal tag, so that is documented both on scene and then again prior to autopsy. Before cutting that seal, they make sure that it is still that same seal that I initially had placed, and they document it too. And
then the photograph that's now depicted on the screen, is that Exhibit 6?
Yes,
And again, contains the information that you indicated about what is contained inside, and then the signature and seal.
correct.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Mr. Freilich.
Ms. Schwab, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Different parts of the body of the deceased were in different areas, correct?
Correct.
Some parts were at the Stony Brook Lane property, correct?
Correct.
In the basement?
Correct.
And then some other body parts were inside of a gold Town and Country minivan, correct?
Correct.
And that minivan was found in the parking lot of Eastman Avenue apartment complex?
That would have been found by law enforcement. The street name does ring a bell, but they would have towed it from that location that they found it to the storage room or storage warehouse that I responded to.
You saw the minivan at the police storage unit, correct?
Correct.
And that was with Dr. Tranchita?
Correct.
Is it Tranquita?
Tranquita.
Okay, thank you. You were given some information as to what may or may not have happened at the 829 Stony Brook Lane property, correct?
Correct.
And you went there for the very first time on February 23rd of 2022?
Correct.
What time did you get to the Stony Brook home?
Would have been around 11 a.m.
In the morning?
Correct.
And you were let in by law enforcement?
Yes.
Who let you in, do you know?
It would have been a detective. I do not remember which. There were multiple detectives at the scene.
Did you talk to the owners of the house?
Not at that time, no. They were not present.
When you got there, you already had your PPE gear on?
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Yes.
And then did you immediately go down into the basement?
Not immediately, no.
Okay, how long did it take before you went into the basement?
Probably about 15 to 20 minutes.
What took so long before you went down in the basement?
They were briefing me on what had occurred, and they were making sure that I was okay to go down there because they were processing, I believe, already. So we would just have been discussing what had been found so far, what information we had so far prior to taking me down,
So you had to be cleared, so to speak?
so to speak.
Okay. And when you went down the stairs, what was the first thing you looked at?
As I went down the stairs, I would have turned to my right, which would have been a finished portion that seemed to be used as mixed-use area, bedroom type area. And I would have probably turned my attention to the bucket that was at the bottom of the stairs that I had been made aware of.
Okay, you looked at the bucket and the contents?
Correct.
Downstairs, fair to say that if you go to the right, it's kind of like a living area where you could sleep or watch TV or hang out, correct?
Correct.
Did you see like a Pac-Man game down there, video game?
I remember some sort of console game, but yeah.
Do you see a round table down there?
Yeah.
And lots of clutter, lots of things?
Yes.
With regards to the bucket, what color was it?
Black.
And you did your investigation with regards to the contents of the bucket, correct?
Correct.
When you got there, had the scene been disturbed in any way from what you know?
From what I know, there was a disturbance probably when the bucket was found, but I don't believe anything else had really been disturbed. I believe Green Bay Police Department perhaps had started putting out their little evidence markers, but they hadn't necessarily removed any remains or, as far as I was made aware, removed any evidentiary items.
When you were at the Stony Brook property, did you call Dr. Tranquita?
I would have called him prior to going to the house.
Did he give you any directions on what you should do or shouldn't do?
I think the directions would have come through their director of operations, and we have standing policies that in cases where homicide might be suspected, that we go into the scene, pronounce death, exit the scene, get some basic information for them, and wait for their arrival before proceeding with any further examination.
After you looked at the bucket and the contents of the bucket, did you pronounce death then, or?
Yes.
Okay. What was the time of death?
I would have to check my report.
Was it sometime after 11 a.m.?
Yes.
Did you know of any other concerns that were in the basement after you looked at the bucket?
I was notified that they suspected that there were human remains in other receptacles or other containers within the basement.
Okay. So in the basement, there was like either a dresser or TV stand, is that fair?
Correct.
And there was I think you said a blue bag on the dresser or on the TV stand?
Among other things, yes, a blue bag was noted.
The blue bag, was it a Jimmy Choo like duffel bag that you can zip and has handles on it?
I'm unsure what the brand name was, but yeah, it was a rectangular shaped blue bag with handles.
Okay. Something you could maybe put clothes in or something, correct?
Yeah.
And where was that located?
That was located on the dresser that was in front of the bed.
Was there a TV on this dresser?
I don't remember if there was.
Any evidence of drugs on the dresser?
Law enforcement had pointed out some items on the dresser that they believed to be drugs.
Meth?
I do believe that they said that they thought it was methamphetamine.
Okay. Pipes?
Yes.
With regards to the bag that we're talking about with the handles, you had gloves on at the time?
Correct.
When did you put your gloves on?
Sorry, could you
When did you
repeat?
put your gloves on? Do you remember?
What did I put my gloves
No,
on?
when? When did
Oh,
you put-
when?
yeah.
We would have put gloves on in the basement prior to touching any items.
Okay. So you had the gloves on before you inspected the black container or bucket?
Correct.
Did anybody assist you with removing items from the duffel bag?
Dr. Tranquita and I were removing the items together.
Had you ever seen anything like this before in your experience?
I have seen mutilation, but nothing to this extent before.
Never saw a head in a bucket, correct?
Correct.
So after you looked at the bag on the dresser, then is that when you turned your attention to the backpack?
Yes, after the blue bag on the dresser, we would have then turned our attention to a black and pink backpack that was on the floor at the foot of the bed.
Now, the bed in this basement, were there mattresses that were stacked on top of each other, or what can you tell me about that?
I remember that they were 3 items. I don't know if it's 2 mattresses and 1 base versus 2 bases and 1 mattress, but 3 things stacked as a bed.
Okay. There was no, it wasn't like a headboard and a footboard, correct?
No.
Just basically mattresses, correct?
Yeah.
And you went over to this backpack, right?
Yes.
Was it an Under Armour backpack?
I would probably have to check photographs for the brand.
But it had some colors to it?
It had,
Did it have colors like black and pink or something?
yes, it was black and pink, and there was some red staining on the outside,
Why did you focus on that?
probably because of the red staining.
Okay. Did you discover that, or did someone else point that to your attention?
When we were walking around just looking at the scene together, it would have been in conjunction with law enforcement,
Okay.
and we would have, tried to lift it, and it seemed suspiciously heavy for a backpack.
And did you have to unzip that Under Armour backpack?
Yes, we unzipped each zip from front to back and looked at the contents.
And you removed the contents from that Under Armour backpack?
Correct.
And what'd you do with it?
We placed everything that we found within the backpack on an evidence sheet that was then placed into a body bag.
And you took some photographs, right?
Correct.
What were these items in that Under Armour backpack?
There were various fragments of human remains.
tissue?
Yes, human tissue.
I think the other container you said was a blue tote,
Yes.
and where was that?
That would be on the floor at what I consider the head of the bed.
Was it by the wall?
Yes, between the bed and the wall.
Was that area of the basement kind of dark?
Yes.
The lighting wasn't very good?
No.
And there was items on top of this tote,
Yes, if I remember correctly, it was laundry items.
blankets?
It could have been blankets, it could have been clothes, or a combination thereof.
And did you see some blood on the outside of the tote?
Yes.
Would you say it was a teal tote?
Yes.
And are you the one that took the blanket or the clothes off of the tote?
I believe we were doing that in conjunction with a detective from Green Bay Police Department.
You remember the name of the detective that was with you?
There were multiple. It was Detective Cassie Pakala and Phil Scanlon that were mainly assisting.
They were both there?
Correct.
Was that tote difficult to see?
No,
Would it be difficult to see if you were coming down the stairs as you get off the last stair?
not necessarily, no.
But it was towards the back of the basement, is that correct?
Yes.
So the black bucket, the duffel bag with the two handles, the Under Armour backpack, and the blue tote, those items apparently had human remains in them?
Correct.
And you didn't know whose remains they belonged to, did you?
They had given us the presumptive ID, and especially the head, we had already, by use of that tattoo and the booking photograph provided by Green Bay Police Department, we were fairly certain that we had the correct identity. And seeing at that point that inventory that we'd been doing so far had only indicated remains that were consistent with one human male, at that point we were comfortable that these remains were all belonging to the same person.
Who was able to confirm that? Was that done later when the remains were transported to Dane County?
Correct. That would have been a more thorough inventory of all of the fragments collected to make sure that these essentially complete a full human male.
So the full identification was not done at Stony Brook, it was done in the medical examiner's office in Dane County, correct?
Ultimately.
Okay. And fair to say that both you and the detectives had a lot of questions on what occurred and how this could occur, true?
Yes.
And everybody was trying to figure out what happened, is that true?
Yes.
Chain of custody was followed?
As far as the human remains that I was involved with, yes.
And the bucket, the duffel bag, the Under Armour backpack, and the blue tote, were those all taken from Stony Brook, from the Stony Brook Lane home and brought to the police department for further examination?
I did not remove them myself, so it was likely removed by the Green Bay Police Department, but we, as the medical examiner's office, do not collect those sorts of items.
Okay, nothing further. Thank you very much.
Redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, you can step down, thank you. You can handle those exhibits, ma'am.